This is a tricky one. I'm not worried about the rules of journalism and contempt of court, because I know that you understand them, and we are all grown-ups on this programme. So there is a suspect in the horrors that unfolded on the streets of Liverpool yesterday, and an arrest has been made. Charges have not been brought. We will not be discussing anything with regard to what happened, especially, except insofar as how the police chose to describe the suspect. And it is new. This is something that I don't have enough confidence in my... What's the word I want? I said news antennae in the little talk-up at the end of Nick's show. It should be a better word than that. I don't have enough confidence in my convictions, almost. I don't have enough courage in my convictions to be 100% certain that my inklings last night when this story first broke were correct. But they were. I've checked with people who are much older, well, not older necessarily, but much more experienced and much more reliable in these matters than I am. They have chosen to describe the suspect in this case as a white British man, a 53-year-old white British man. So far it could be me. A 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area. And what I had to check with more experienced colleagues was that this is a new development. This is not something that would ordinarily have happened. And I think it's pretty clear why it has happened. Because of fears of far-right provocateurs either taking to social media to spread lies and misinformation about the identity, the ethnicity, the religion, the immigration history of the suspect, or, and this is where I get really worried, or had the suspect ticked some of the boxes beloved of far-right racist provocateurs, then I can't help worrying now that the message from the police would be, we now expect violence, but we don't expect it when we tell you that the suspect is a 53-year-old white British man. And I know there is a world of difference between expect and invite, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm struggling to see where the line between the two is this morning. I'm really struggling not to see this development as a tacit admission that when the suspect in a case like this is brown or Muslim or not from these shores originally by birth, then it would somehow be, what word do I want now? Acceptable? Probably not. Unless you're one of the people minded to get involved in that kind of violence. What message do you take away from this decision to pander to your prejudices? And remember that in the case of the Southport killings, the prejudices were false. The people spreading lies and misinformation for clicks and influence were in possession of precisely zero facts. The usual suspects jumping on the usual bandwagons to whip up hatred of asylum seekers. Now they're trying to defend a woman who pleaded guilty to incitement to racial hatred after calling for a pogrom to start in hotels full of people wholly innocent of any crimes. But that is the world we live in now. That is the country we inhabit. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 60 60973. Tell me that this is not a surrender of sorts to the forces of hate. Why else would they make this such a top priority? Why else do they need to get the colour, the ethnicity, the nationality of the suspect into public discourse so early, if not to somehow prevent the kind of scenes that we saw on our streets this summer after the Southport killings? 9 minutes after 10 is the time. I usually at this point start exploring the alternative position. I usually at this point start explaining the counterpoint to what I'm suggesting. But I can't currently see it. And that worries me on two levels, one serious, one not so serious. On the serious level, it worries me because I can't see the counterpoint. And on a less serious level, it worries me because I don't know what you're going to say to me today. I mean, if we all agree, whether we are repulsed by the sort of scenes that we saw during the Farage riots of last summer, or whether we are minded to join in and are excited by them, I don't know that we would disagree that the decision to release the identity of the suspect, that the identifying characteristics of the suspect can be seen as anything other than an admission that when people suspected of undertaking behaviours like this fit certain categories, religiously, ethnically, in terms of immigration status, then there will be blood. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, I presume there'll be nobody on social media today encouraging you to set fire to buildings containing 53-year-old white British men like me. I presume that won't happen, and I presume all the people currently queuing up to defend the woman who made precisely that plea when the buildings were full of asylum seekers won't recognise the danger of their own position. What does it mean now? What does it mean that the police are tacitly, and again I say, please tell me that I'm wrong about this, but from where I'm sitting, the police are tacitly acknowledging that if a crime is committed by a certain type of human being, the response from certain sections of the public will be completely different from what it would be if a crime is committed by, for example, a 53-year-old white British man. What does it mean that has happened? That's a good phrase from David, ugly pragmatism. Because I don't know that you can fault the police's decision. I mean, the tragedy here for our country, for people who rather like living here and don't understand the effort that so-called patriots put into trying to impugn and malign our island nation, the tragedy here is that the police are right, aren't they? I'm not on Twitter anymore, but sometimes it will filter through to the platforms that I am still on. Some of the poison that is being spread, some of the obvious lies, some of the claims that it was a false flag. I mean, I don't think the average Joe or Joan appreciates just how deep into public discourse this terminal online far-right talking point has gone. I mean, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, is part of this particular problem. The broader question of being terminally online and focusing and swallowing far-right talking points. I don't think that it is widely or properly appreciated, even by quite senior members of traditional media, even quite probably by me, just how deep into the bloodstream of public discourse this hatred and bigotry has now gone. You know, you don't need me to tell you which politicians thrive on this hatred and bigotry. You don't need me to tell you which politicians, public figures, pundits, commentators and columnists actively encourage and then benefit from it. But the message that is being sent to the country today, I think, is we don't worry about riots when the suspect is a white British 53-year-old man. And I don't know what that says about our country, and I don't know what that means for our future. But I want you to tell me. 03456060973 is the number that you need. You know, obviously this is sensitive stuff. Thank God so far. We are not talking about fatalities in the context of the incident in Liverpool, but we know that 4 children are among the injured, and we will, as ever on LBC, be bringing you any news and developments as they occur. The injuries of at least 2 people are very serious. We know that. But the focus of this conversation is on something that has shifted in our country, in our nation. And I'm not going to say for good or for ill, because it's the worst kind of thing. It's the worst kind of shift. I think it's awful, and I think it had to happen. So today is one of those days, which we haven't had for a while, and please God it stays true that we are not discussing fatalities. But today is one of those days where it is as if we work together, or it is as if we are not on the same bus. I don't think you start conversations like this on the bus, possibly in Yorkshire, but certainly not on my bus route. But it is as if we know each other outside of our morning radio encounters, and we are just going to sit down and chat. And I'm no more qualified than you are. I guess I've awarded myself the role of starting the conversation. If we were sitting around the same water cooler, or we were sitting at the same table in the staff canteen, I would probably have begun by saying, "Is it just me?" You know, when you do that, when you're about to sort of launch a rhetorical hand grenade into the conversation, is it just me? Or does the fact that the police have immediately told us that the suspect is a white British 53-year-old man, is it just me? Or does that mean that if he wasn't, the message to the Farage rioters and their friends would be, fill your boots? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Of course, there are questions. Fred in Guildford poses one. If a 53-year-old white British man is suspected of an atrocity, surely the legitimate concerns crowd will be out protesting at golf clubs and model train shops. I think that's a slightly unfair portrayal of 53-year-old men. Fred, speaking as a 53-year-old white British man, I can assure you I'm not particularly interested in golf clubs or model train shops, but I have started spending more time than is healthy in garden centres. So actually, if you add garden centres to the list, then yes, the legitimate concerns mob should no doubt be calling for garden centres to be set on fire, or sending their rampaging, knuckle-dragging followers onto the local golf course. I'm Fred making light of the situation, but with a sense of seriousness. With a sense of seriousness. Steve says, "Have you considered that the driver could be a white Muslim? You're going to look a mug if that turns out to be true." Steve, they're making my point for me in ways that I could not have driven home as powerfully if I'd continued this introduction for 3 hours. Because if it does turn out to be a white Muslim, Steve will think that it's okay to riot. It's okay to set fire to hotels full of asylum seekers. It's okay to attack the police. It's okay to throw bricks at the thin blue line. It's a big moment, this. I'm always slightly wary of saying that first. Not first. There are a couple of other people who are tilting at similar windmills, but I'm always slightly wary of it because my instincts are not brilliant when it comes to what the news is, but they're pretty good when it comes to where bigotry is taking us, where ignorance and demagoguery, where the snake oil salesmen are leading us. Haven't been wrong about that for a while, if ever. And I think this is a big win for them. We now live in a country where if the suspect in a horrific event is described as white British, we can be confident that we won't be seeing rampaging mobs taking to the streets of our country and attacking entirely innocent people for the crimes of somebody perceived, or the alleged crimes of somebody perceived to be a little bit more like the suspect than them. It's not quite scale of 1 to 10 stuff, is it? But on a scale of 1 to 10, how troubled are you by this? Because I think I'm a 10. Just in terms of what it says about society, in terms of what it says about where we are. The 53-year-old white British man, even as I speak, it's popping up on the subtitles on my TV screen. That didn't used to happen. And of course, underpinning all of the questions that I'm asking you, what if it wasn't? What if it wasn't? I mean, why are they telling us this? If not to acknowledge that if it wasn't a 53-year-old white British man, then the reaction would not only be very different, but somehow also sanctioned or encouraged, invited or acknowledged, whatever verb you prefer.